I'm Howard Levine from Boston, and it's a pleasure to be here talking to you about Bion, and in particular in anticipation of the Ribeiro Preto conference, which I'm very pleased to hear that you're going to be hosting next year. The question of Bion. I was fortunate enough when I began my psychiatric training, before I was a psychoanalyst, I was fortunate enough to be asked to lead an inpatient group on a very special psychiatric ward, a 10-patient ward, where the supervisor for the group was the only person in Boston at the time who had any knowledge of or interest in Bion. His plan was to lead the inpatient group, which met 5 days a week, in the way that Bion took groups at the Tavistock Clinic. So we started off my psychiatric training by reading experience in groups. I did that for 3 months. I enjoyed it. I think I was successful. In my 3rd year of residency, they asked me to lead the group for a year. And I went back to the same supervisor. We met twice a week. And we also read Attention and Interpretation, which had just come out. So I had a very strong inoculation in Bion from the very beginning. Then I started psychoanalytic training in a very ego-psychoanalytic world, very ego-psychological world. And I found that the analysis that I was taught worked very well with neurotic patients, neurotic parts of the people's mind, but seemed to be limited when it came to the more difficult borderline and psychotic parts of people's minds and the borderline and cases of primitive personality disorders. And what Bion has done for me and meant for me as I immersed myself more in his work and tried to understand the clinical implications of his work was that it opened up a whole new avenue to understanding and intervening in the analysis of the more primitive patients and the more primitive parts of patients' minds. That the idea of something in need of transformation rather than something which really means creation or co-creation, rather than simply uncovering and discovering what's already there, just added the missing ingredient, the necessary dimension, to have a more comprehensive way of thinking about listening to, understanding, and working with patients. And it's not just Bion, but the other analysts that he's influenced, because Bion was a very important influence for Andre Green, along with Green's three great influences were Lacan, Winnicott, and Bion. People know about Green and Lacan. Some of Green's papers have been written in memoriam or in appreciation of Winnicott, but Bion was a very important influence in the work of Andre Green. And the whole notion of representation and its vicissitudes, the failure of representation, comes out of Green's study of Bion, I think, as much as it does out of his reading of early Freud and some of the work of Winnicott. So that Bion has been both a very useful component to my analytic thinking and working, but it's also been a very important instrument in the development of theories of other authors who I value and rely on a great deal. Many in the French school, the Roussillon, Green, Patrick Miller, to some extent the Patellas, but it's less visible in their references. But I think it's there in the background because they were influenced by Green, and I think that they've caught the Bion without reading Bion, but they caught it from Andre's work. So I think that it's been extraordinarily useful to me, and also fascinating and interesting. So I've spent a lot of time thinking, reading, teaching, writing about Bion, among other things, and I hope to continue to go on doing that. Thank you.